written in the slave period, so unfortunately he was his slave. So basically they lured me to help them find this buried treasure. And it's a pretty cool film, you might like it. You can find it on YouTube. So that was the second one, and the one before that was this Jennifer's Journey.
What do I type in at the search bar?
Cool, type in the Gold Bug on YouTube and you can see it, yeah. You might like it.
Book.
Yeah, the Gold Bug, like a bug, B-U-G.
Okay.
Cool. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but is there anything else?
Actually, something popped into my mind. It wasn't until many, many years later that I realized John Cusack was with you in 16 Candles.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorite John Cusack movies is Con Air. I think it would be awesome to see you in an action movie with John Cusack.
Thank you. I like John. Okay, now here's another John Hughes story. Now this is actually the truth. We get to Chicago to start shooting 16 Candles. We had auditions for the buddies, my two nerd buddies. So those two guys came in. So Cusack came from a family that was kind of in the theater world in Chicago, the Cusack family, and I wound up working with his sister on that film, Joan, who's a great lady. But John Hughes turned to me after we were auditioning all these guys. I swear to you, he said, "I want you to cast the part." And I go, "Why?" He goes, "Well, they're your buddy. You got to." So John Hughes let me cast the two guys. So I actually cast John Cusack in 16 Candles with John Hughes' blessing. I know this was my reaction too. At 15, I'm like, "What?" Is he serious?
That's cool.
Yeah, wasn't that cool? And then the other guy, I'll never forget, wasn't he great? The skinny guy, Darren. I forget Darren's last name. One of my favorite moments is remember when we get kicked out of the party, and of the big football dudes, they put him in the trunk. Do you remember that, guys? And when they pull him out of the trunk, he's like stiff as a board.
Speech is over for them.
Remember that? Oh, that guy was so funny. So that's one of my
Was
favorites.
that scripted, or did they just do that?
John was always coming up with stuff that we would ad-lib. I can go through, honestly, if we could watch those movies together, guys, you'd be blown away. Like a lot of the stuff I wrote and ad-libbed, or we made up together, and this is why he was so cool. This is back to how I was saying how collaborative he was. So here's an example of the scene we made up. So we're doing the party scene before we get kicked out, and the football guys throw the other guy in the trunk. You remember the party scene? I go to Jake Ryan's house, and it's like all the cool kids are there. Okay, and then there's the after party, and I'm underneath the table. You guys remember that? Okay, so I get to the set to block that scene, and it wasn't written that way. So the art department did a great job making a mess. You know, there's like old style beer cans everywhere, pizzas on the record player, and they had to go out of their way to make a mess, right? So we get there, and we're about to block the scene, and John sees that we had a clear glass table, right? So he goes, "You think you can fit under that table?" I go, "Watch this, boss." So I go under the table, and then there you go. That's how John Hughes had lived. So then the whole thing was like, they move the food, and you see my little beady eye, you know? And I'm like drumming on the glass to get out of there. There's one example. That was made up, you know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the bar scene in Weird Science, same thing. Like, my heroes growing up with George Carlin and Richard Pryor. I really wasn't into I love movies, but I really love those comedians, and I love rockers. Like, I love Van Halen, The Police. I was in my room, like, reading Cream magazine, you know, listening to Van Halen, you know, one of those kids. And so when I got to work with John, often we would be at his house on the weekends. Okay, I want to connect this to another story, so bear with me. Sorry, Pennywise, I bored the shit out of you. You guys go to bed.
My wife is calling.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Priorities, man. So the scene in Weird Science came from when we were doing the Breakfast Club. Often I'd go to his house on the weekends, and we would watch everything from Abbott and Costello to the Three Stooges to, all these different things. And we would watch like Richard Pryor, live on Sunset Strip, those old great comedies, live performances that he did. Richard Pryor used to do a character called Mudbone. Mudbone was an old black guy from Illinois that he knew. Now, this is true. Richard Pryor, his mother was from a house madam, so he kind of grew up around ladies of the night, and his mom kind of ran this place. So he was exposed to a lot at a very young age. But anyway, so Mudbone was this character from Illinois. And he was an old black man, so he does these bits in his old concert films where he's imitating this gentleman named Mudbone. And Mudbone talked like this, "Go outside, get some sunshine on your face, what?" You know, like this funny old character. So I would come to the set of the Breakfast Club after we'd be at John's house, and I'd be hanging with him and his wife, and I'd be imitating Richard Pryor for him. That sets an idea in his head. So then cut to Weird Science. He set that whole scene up at the Blues Bar because I would imitate Richard Pryor. So that's how that happened. So back to his creativity, he was always kind of molding things, and truly what he did for me, he did for all of us. So there's a lot of ad lib in those films for that reason. Now, here's the thing about John Hughes, another John Hughes story. Back to watching these old movies, these old classic comedies, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello. Remember Home Alone, guys? Okay, so remember when he traps Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci in the house? How does he do it? He's watching an old movie, right? So John Hughes taught me, he literally said to me, you have to write about what you know. So there again, you see how he drew from his experience? He would be watching these old black and white comedies or whatever. So he gives that to Macaulay's character, right? So he figures out how to trap the bad guys in the house by getting ideas from the old movie that he's watching. You see what I mean? Do you see how John did it? So that's some of his brilliance.
It's amazing how much the film industry has to be made up on the go and let the creativity flow, because if it's too scripted, then that's when creativity gets stifled.
It's a great point. And the way he would approach just what you just said is we would shoot the scene as written, 2 or 3 takes, and then we would direct the rest and play. And if things came up, he would mold it and shape it. So back to Harold Ramis, same thing, great writer. The scripts were always funny, the scenes were always funny, and there was always nice distribution. People had things to do, and it was cool for everybody. But same thing, you know, the idea of let's play, let's make it better. And I think in the spirit of that, he got so much out of all of us because he just wanted to make the guy happy and please him. He was such a great guy. He was so fun and open. And then cut to Halloween Kills 2 years ago. I saw the same thing in David Gordon Green. You know, we're making this horror movie, but he was just cool and loose and like got ideas from everybody. He wasn't uptight. Like the key grip, the camera guy, anybody could suggest something. He was like totally open to it. So that's why he reminded me of John, you know, and Harold too. And honest to God, my first memory of when I think of Harold and John is those guys laughing on set. Like that's my memory in my head, which is cool.
Laughter is super important.
Wow.
You've even done, you talked about impersonations, and you've even done a couple of voice inflections. Have you done any voice acting? Or are you
I
looking for
did,
voice
guys.
acting?
I did one episode of American Dad because I'm a huge Seth MacFarlane fan. You guys love him? Isn't he great? So I got to do one of those, and that was killing. And I just think he's brilliant. I love this guy. I love him. And I also love Matt and Trey and South Park. Those guys are brilliant, all 3 of them. So yeah, I did. That was the only one I did. Was American Dad. It was pretty funny. And I remember on that, I had a quick story. I was in New York at the time when I got the job, and I had to do a cast read-through on speakerphone. And it was so cool because I could only hear all of them, like all the regular voice actors on that show. And then, of course, I could hear Seth doing like 3 or 4 voices in that episode. So he's brilliant. I love that guy. Yeah, so that was the only thing I did that was voice acting. Let's do more.
Any other questions?
I got one.
Yeah, man.
Did
We'll
Ted,
go with it.
oh, good first.
No, you too. Go ahead.
Did Ted go all the way with Caroline?
Before she lost all her hair. Then the Me Too movement. Now nobody can talk about anything. I can't even joke about it. I think that's what's assumed. I think, yeah,
You gotta tell him to buy the book.
the world's changed a lot. I know. I'm sorry, ladies. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't look like that during 16 years. Yeah, I think that was the point. That's the kind of irony is that, you know, I wind up with his girlfriend. And,
Yeah.
Well, there's another thing with John Hughes. The scene where I'm mixing the martinis with Jake Ryan. Okay, by the way, Michael Schofield and I were actually really good buddies. We hung out a lot, okay? And I was always trying to, like, he was the one who taught me about pomade, because remember he had that cool hair? All the chicks loved it. So many years, I can't tell you how many times over 30 years people come up to me, oh, where's Michael Schofield? Do you know Jake? How do we get a hold of Jake? I'm like, oh, thanks, great. You know my farm tip? What the hell? What am I, Chuck? I'm like, he makes furniture now. He was in Vision Quest. What do you want from me? So he was a great guy. So back to the scene in the kitchen. I swear to you guys, I walked on the set of that kitchen, this beautiful suburban house of Chicago. And again, we were vibing. The scene was written as you saw it, but I remember John walking up to me going, okay, well, I'm going to buy that Saw Strangers in the Night. He's setting the scene for me, like right there. He even knew he was going to like put that in the budget. I go, cool. Then we look over and we see like an apron hanging. So he thought that'd be funny. He goes, put the apron on. I go, perfect, let's put the apron on. I'm like, you know, I was like a squirrel monkey for John Hughes. I'm like, what do I got to do, John? Okay, boss, I got it. So then it just developed from there, and all these little funny things became really fun. That's like one of my favorite scenes, because like I'm the old man, and I'm like mixing martinis. I'm like, here, you know, would I screw you over? Whatever I say to you is really fun. So then we'd have that thing, and then I take Caroline home in the Rolls Royce and the whole thing. But that's another standout scene. Just working with John, that kind of sense of play, you know, adding the apron. He's telling me about the Sinatra song. And the scene turned out really funny. But great memories, you know, and I was just, it was a bobblehead, right? I mean, I was 15, I looked like I was 11. I don't know what that, big head on my shoulders. It was about 100 pounds. It was a really great experience. Oh, by the way, here's another funny memory. I almost killed somebody when I was driving the Rolls Royce with her. Remember, we're on the road, and she gives me the birth control pill. For some reason, they let me free drive that sucker. I'm driving the Rolls Royce at like 4 a.m. in Chicago. I literally, and guys, if you watch it again, or when you watch it again, you can see there's something I almost hit. If you keep your eyes peeled to like the side of the image, as I'm driving in that wide shot, I almost hit something. There again, another opportunity. Once I hit the garbage can and I come to a stop, now this is what gave him the idea for Ferris Bueller. Because it's called breaking the fourth wall when we turn into the camera. And I remember having so much fun. It was like 4 a.m. Now we're shooting the aftermath. I've hit a garbage can. Now I've wrecked the Rolls Royce. She's drunk, and now I'm eating, birth control pills, having almost killed somebody in real life. So then he added that bit in the moment. I don't even think it was there. This is getting good. Where I look to the camera and go, this is getting good. And she's like laying on my lap. Again, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. But that's again how, the sense of play with him, it was awesome. You had another one, buddy.
Yes.
Mr. Moulton, please. You're scaring me with that vocabulary and cinephile approach. Good.
You mentioned George Carlin and Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
One could argue that stand-up is one of the hardest things a performer could be asked to do. What makes that type of performance stand up to you?
Stand-up in general, or those guys?
Stand-up.
I think they're incredibly courageous. And I'll tell you what, guys, I've worked and known so many comedians in my lifetime. Honestly, when they're starting out, they don't make jack. They might get like $20 for a set or something very limited. Or you have cab money. That was going back in the day. And they really work their asses off. And it's a really difficult job. And it's just like being a musician. The only way to be good at it is to be in a band, be playing and touring, you know what I mean? So I have great respect for comics. But I'll tell you, it's really funny. Off camera, like when they're not on stage, they can be very funny with each other. Because I've never been a stand-up, but I've been around them all my life, So they're actually very competitive with each other, and they give each other shit. So I love comics. I really do. I admire them. My wife and I love going to see comedy. So I've known a lot of comics, and I think it's a very, think about it, it's just the mic in your mind, and you gotta make people laugh. And the only way to get good at it is to fall on your face and keep working at it, So those guys I admire, like my heroes, like Richard Pryor, George Carlin for sure, and then Eddie Murphy after that. I loved Eddie. I have great respect for those guys to this day, It still scares me. I watch them. It's really, if you think about it, you're just really on your own wits, trying to make a living. But when it works, it can lead to great success, Excuse me, like sitcoms or TV shows. There's so many great comics, male and female. And SNL, that was another experience in my life. I got to do that, and I was 17 years old when I did it, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I was at home like 2 years before watching Eddie Murphy, so that was an amazing experience. But back to scripted versus non-scripted, SNL is a really regimented schedule. Just to give you guys a sense of that for a second. Like 30 Rock is about basically supposed to be behind the scenes at SNL. I don't know if you guys knew that or not, you probably did, but basically we'd come in on a Monday at SNL. We would then be encouraged to start going to all the cubicles of the other writers, collaborating, talking about ideas. The guest star or guest host would come in, and then we would have meetings all throughout the day at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, which is where the ice skating rink is and where the Today Show is. And just the thrill of doing that show. So you come in, you start mixing it up, going to meet with other writers. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you have all that time to come up with ideas and sketches. The format when I was on it was we'd have to turn in our sketches at 12 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. And then we had, at the time, this was like pre-computers, so we had assistants, people in the office that would then type them up and deliver them. And then we'd do a big group read-through. And Lorne Michaels would sit at the end of the table. Now, I don't know if you guys know this. Remember the Austin Power movies? Okay, so Mike Myers patterned Dr. Evil off of Lorne Michaels. It's that, like, he literally talks like that. I don't know if anybody knows that. He does. So we would do the read-through, and just like this situation, whatever got the most laughs in our group read-throughs of all the sketches, then a couple hours go by, Lorne would go back to his office, sequester himself, and then on a cork board, like you see, like on the Jimmy Fallon show, you see all these shows, right? Well, they'll show who's on the show next week. With index cards on a cork board, he would itemize it 3 columns, each half hour representing a column of the show. And on Wednesday night, he would start putting it together. Now take this, on Thursday morning, we'd all have to come to work 10, 11 a.m. in the morning. Guys, we'd rehearse till like 11 o'clock at night. So we'd have 12 hours of rehearsal all day Thursday into the night. Friday, same thing, come in around 10, 11, all day rehearsals into the night. Saturday, same thing, all day rehearsals into the night. Now, here's the other thing, I don't know if a lot of people know this. On Saturday night, we do the show twice. Every time you see Saturday Night Live, it's actually the second time they've done the whole show that night. So we would be, the excitement of it, some great star or actor, whoever it was, athlete. I worked with so many people, Madonna, Oprah, all these people would be hosting. And we'd do the show, and they would have the one audience in the hallway, right, where you see them doing sketches in the hallway. The audience lines up, they bring them in, all the ushers. We do the show from 8 to 10:30. Then we have 1 hour, and that audience exits. They bring in the live audience. We all run up to Lorne Michaels' office, which would be atop the bleachers. We've all seen SNL, right? Where the bleachers are where people sit? Lorne Michaels' office is actually up there at the top of the bleachers. So then the MO would be, we'd all have to run up to Lorne's office for notes. Okay, so we'd all we're up there, we're gonna go see what the notes, what gets cut, last minute changes, blah, blah, blah. And then we do the show again. So check that out, right? So that's like a 6 to 8 week job. Then the best part was the parties afterwards. We'd have these great parties. So, it was such a thrill. Even if you didn't have great sketches or anything that you were like standout characters, which I did. The season I was on, guys, don't YouTube it. So, okay? It was terrible. It was not good. But just that experience of doing it. It was like rock and roll theater, stand-up. It was like everything rolled into one. And the thrill, even if you like didn't have much to do, it was great. And the other great moment is we'd all get the call at the end, where everybody goes on stage at the end with the guest host, we all stand there. And that was always cool too, a great feeling. But just a great thing, like I said, a kind of an amalgam, a blending of theater, rock and roll, everything. Just an amazing experience with SNL. But I digress. Okay, sir.
Is there ever a role that you passed on that you thought, man, I wish I had done that?
Well, what's interesting is like this came up recently when I was promoting Halloween Kills, and I told this gentleman that I was talking to, I waited a long time to tell this story, but I actually, Ferris Bueller was written for me, and then John wanted me to do Pretty in Pink. Unfortunately, I was doing other work because of the work he gave me. So it was a conflict in schedules, and at the same time, I was also looking to do other stuff. So when I read the script for Pretty in Pink, I felt, well, this is very similar to 16 Candles in a way. And I don't like to disparage anybody. We all deserve success in life. And so it didn't work out, unfortunately, but Ferris Bueller was written for me, and that turned out to be a bigger hit, honestly, than the other 3 movies I did with John. And I think Matthew Broderick's great, so, I wish everybody success, and those films turned out to be successful. And John did not direct Pretty in Pink. It was a guy named Howie Deutsch. His wife is Leah Thompson. I wound up working with her years later. So those were 2 of them. The one that's, I think, most noted, I guess, when it comes to my career is Full Metal Jacket. And this was a really interesting experience with Stanley Kubrick, okay? You guys know what a great genius he was. He was a really fantastic filmmaker, a really incredible guy. So when I was doing Weird Science, I got a call from my agent at the time. It was a gentleman named Marty Bauer. And he calls me, and I'm a 17-year-old kid. I'm staying at the Universal, right next to the Universal Tour, up on that hill in Hollywood. If you guys have ever been to the Universal Tour, it was a Sheraton at the time. And I get a call on a Friday from my agent. He goes, Stanley Kubrick is doing this war picture about Vietnam called Full Metal Jacket, and he's interested in you to play one of the guys in the platoon. So I was like, what? This was like a Thursday, actually, excuse me. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. The next day, my agent calls me. He goes, he wants you to play the lead. I didn't know this was like new information, right? And I was like, wow, he's going to call you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay, it's like the Wizard of Oz is going to call you, right? So I'm up at like 7 a.m. pacing in my room. I'm like, Stanley Kubrick's going to what the hell is going on in my life? This is like incredible, right? Cut to the conversation. So the first thing he says to me, I hear the phone ring. Literally, guys, I'm pacing in my hotel room 2 hours before he calls. The phone rings. I'm like, hello? Just like the Wizard of Oz. I expected some deep guttural voice. He said, hey, Michael, it's Stanley Kubrick from London. How you doing, sir? The first thing he said to me, and honestly, guy, I always share this because it was the greatest compliment I've ever had in my life. He said, first thing out of his mouth, he goes, I just screened 16 Candles 3 times. Okay, mic drop, phone drop. I'm like, what? And then he said to me, he goes, you're my, I have to tell you, Michael, you're my favorite actor I've seen since I saw Jack Nicholson in Easy Rider. I was like, I know, so I tripped out. It was really wrong. Okay, now cut to, he was very private about his work. Excuse me, so I had to go read a script at his lawyer's house, who lived on the street where they used to film the Beverly Hillbillies, believe it or not, way up in Bel Air, like old school Bel Air, you know, Beverly Hills. I went with my father, my stepfather at the time, and this old gentleman named Louis Blau, his attorney, and he kindly greeted us at the door, escorted me into the kitchen, and there was a numbered screenplay of Full Metal Jacket. And to be very honest with you guys, what happened was the negotiation became about money, but it really wasn't money, it was like the time that it took to make the film. And it was 8 months of negotiating. It was unbelievable. So at the time, my stepfather was my manager. He's no longer with us, my fellow Tom, he was a great guy. We negotiated for 8 months. At one point, he was communicating through Louis, and he asked Louis Blau to ask my father if he had read a book called Nuclear Negotiations. Because my father was a good negotiator. Now, can you believe it took 8 months? So sadly, this is the only thing close to any regret I would have in my whole life that I didn't do the film, unfortunately. But an incredible conversation. Let me go back to that for a second. He starts talking about his favorite directors, and those guys with such education. He mentioned Eisenstein, who was a famous Russian director like 100 years ago. Chaplin, like influences that he had. And like you guys looking at me now, I was like, this is an amazing conversation I'm having with the guy. And I spoke to him one time after that, and as you guys know, it didn't work out. I cut to 3 years later, I see Matthew Modine in New York City, right? The guy who played the part of the Joker. That's the part he wanted me to play. And I ran up to him, and I was still a scrawny little kid, you know, and I said, hey, Matt, how you doing, man? I got a question for you. He goes, I go, how long did you shoot on Full Metal Jacket? You ready, guys? He goes, 54 weeks. I go, what? So Kubrick was methodical. He was so detail-oriented. He was one of the only directors that could command that because his films were so great. And very interestingly, he started out as a photographer in the Bronx in the 50s. He worked for a magazine called Look magazine, which was like the predecessor to Life magazine. He was an incredible photographer. And then he became a filmmaker. Got distracted by that door. So he was an incredible guy, you know. But he was known for shooting his movies that long. Even at that time, I remember reading about him. And he had the great luxury of shooting that long on a film. And honestly, the only other person who had that luxury as a filmmaker was Charlie Chaplin, literally over 100 years ago, because the industry was new. So Chaplin was known for shooting for months, and until he had other ideas about the slapstick and the physical comedy, he might just like tell the crew to take a break and then come back and shoot and finish his films. So interesting, because he brought up Chaplin. He was the only other person who was ever given that much time. But he was just truly a genius, I think. I mean, if you look at his films, guys, like The Shining, who can't watch The Shining, right? Like, I still watch it. I've seen that movie about 100 times. They're worth studying, his films. 2001, I'm still trying to figure it out. 53, it's an incredible film, right? 2001. But he did so much great work in his life, so I look back with fondness on that memory because at least I spoke to him, you know, and I often, you know, I think about him a lot, and I felt very privileged to even talk to him.
So you would consider him an inspiration, even if not direct?
Oh, definitely, to this day. Yeah, because I love his films. Even if you watch a movie like Barry Lyndon, like it was a movie made, it took place in the, I don't know, Renaissance period, I don't know what time frame. But in the making of that film, which was one of his least successful films, he worked with his